on the rubble of her home. She cries out for her parents, but the voices are lost. She cannot understand. She's confused. She's alone. There is blood on her hands, but it's not her fault. Not her fight, not her war. She's too young to give up, but it's not her fault.
Welcome back to Remember Palestine with me, Lauren Booth. Today we're looking at life in contemporary Jerusalem. Coming up is an overview of this incredible city from ancient times to the present.
Famous for her holiness, the blessed land of Jerusalem, Al-Quds, is considered to be one of the oldest cities in the world, dating back to 5000 BC. Jerusalem Al-Quds, a mosaic of sparkling gemstones gleaming in the eyes of men, was first given her name by the Canaanites. Prior to 3000 BC, the land was inhabited by Jebusite Arabs, who built it and called it the City of Peace, as the name of their deity, Salem. Its religious dimension adds to its tangle of conflicting and contradictory identities. Hosting the three monotheistic religions, it has come to decode the history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and is a sacred place for them and a source of spirituality. Though yearning to be a united land, embracing her children with a beating heart, she bled at the feet of marching invaders and conquerors throughout history. Her worshipped face has fed the cruelty and greed of mankind, and as his selfish possession increased, injustice was bred, giving rise to the spread of discrimination. In January 1947, the armed clandestine organization increased their activities, and the situation reached boiling point. Over a year on, the Zionists rejoiced as Western Jerusalem became their captive. Later, incarcerated and confined within an apartheid wall, she was to feel the final blow when the Eastern Territory was occupied and the Israeli flag waved on top of the Dome of the Rock as a reminder of the oppressor. A land dreaming to be a utopia to the inhabitants became an ailing city, in pain and in defeat. The world seems deafened to her screams. More horrors were to unravel. On the 27th of June 1967, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, decided to annex East Jerusalem. More than a decade had passed, and now the Knesset decided that United Jerusalem Al-Quds was the eternal capital for the State of Israel. The motherland has been subject to many racial actions, ranging from the destruction of entire neighborhoods and the confiscation of lands to build settlements. But this is merely a microcosm of what has been going on throughout the territory. Israel's overwhelming victory in 1967 war saw the rapid expansion of settlements. Since then, Israeli governments of all political persuasions have pumped tens of millions of dollars into their expansion between 1967 and 1977.
Ben White, author of A Beginner's Guide to Apartheid, joins me now. Ben, welcome to Remember Palestine. Now, your book, Apartheid, A Beginner's Guide, lays out the argument why there is a two-tier society in Israel today. Israel sells itself in the media as the only democracy in the Middle East. Is that how you see it?
This has been a common propaganda claim by Israel and its apologists in the West for a long time, that it's the Middle East's only democracy, and part of that is relies on comparing it to other countries. But the central claim that Israel is a democracy in the way that we really understand democracy, as being a country that is representing all of its citizens, where there's equality for all of its citizens, is false. There are examples of this all over the place. I mean, obviously the occupied territories is a particularly brutal example where there are two kind of parallel systems of law, military law.
But that's obviously, as you say, it's an occupation. So if, for example, we turn our eyes to a tourist's favourite place like Jerusalem, if you walk the streets and you don't speak to anyone, you could say this is a mixed society of Arabs and Jews with the same rights. What would be wrong with that image, in your opinion?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, the problem is, of course, is that you have to start looking at inside Israel proper and looking at Jerusalem as well. And there you start to see this system at work, which is essentially designed to ensure the domination of one group over another, which is the definition of apartheid. You know, when we're talking about Israeli apartheid, it's not to say it's exactly the same as what happened in South Africa, but we're talking about a system that's set up so that these aren't isolated human rights abuses. What we see in Jerusalem in terms of the demolition of Palestinian homes, the eviction of Palestinians from their homes, the moving in, in parallel of extremist Jewish settlers, the revoking of residency permits.
Now, local municipalities would say, hang on, anybody who's mistreated within the State of Israel can come and make their case to us. We have a legal system.
Sure. Yeah, there are severe limitations for how Palestinians can seek redress here, because what we're talking about is a whole system, as I was saying, it's not a policy of one government. It's been a consistent policy since 1948 in different ways. Just to take Jerusalem as one example, earlier this year, the UN did a report on the so-called planning crisis amongst Palestinians in East Jerusalem, in occupied East Jerusalem. And one of the statistics they came up with was that 13% of the land that Israel unilaterally annexed since '67 in occupied East Jerusalem, only 13% is kept for Palestinian development. Right? So in other words, the rest is off limits to Palestinians for construction, and therefore permits are hard for them to get to build, which is the same in Area C of the West Bank too. So when Palestinians build without permits, as they need to, just for their kind of natural expansion of families and communities, the Israeli authorities can say, oh, well, you've built without a permit, so we have to demolish your home.
How are they defined in paperwork, in bureaucratic terms? Are they listed as Jewish or Arab? Does that go on?
Well, in terms of, if you're looking at the areas that Israel annexed in occupied East Jerusalem and unilaterally expanding the municipal boundaries, Israel has created a number of settlements there since 1967. So the settlements, are Jewish settlements. There's also the reality that the Jerusalem municipality and the Israeli state works with extremist Jewish settler movements to help them take control.
Now, they always deny this. They say, look, we do not want these settlers. This extremism is not part of our state. You're questioning that very clearly.
No, sure. I mean, you'll find reports in the Israeli media of cases where specific examples of Palestinian property has been targeted, and it's been done by an extremist right-wing Jewish settler movement working with a group like the ILA, the Israeli Land Authority, and remembering, of course, as well, that these settler groups get often get millions of tax-exempt donations from donors in the States as well. Now,
apartheid, as we understand it, the control of one group, the bettering of one group over another, has an end, it has an aim to promote one group. Are you saying that the Israeli state is a state for Jews and it doesn't really want to represent any other sort of culture within it, doesn't tolerate it?
The idea of Zionism, right, which is to create a political Jewish state in Palestine, in the Middle East, has always had this fundamental contradiction, which is that despite their best efforts in 1948, there remained a Palestinian minority in its midst, and obviously since '67 Israel's been controlling the lives of millions more Palestinians. So therefore the problem that Israel has had since 1948 is how to reconcile this idea that it wants to be Jewish and democratic. So this idea that you can be Jewish democratic except you have a Palestinian minority inside Israel, and obviously
some 20% of the population.
20% Palestinians in East Jerusalem who don't have citizenship, but they have this residency status, and the Palestinians in the occupied territories who are stateless, aren't citizens of anywhere.
Ben White, we're going to leave it there, but your book, Apartheid, A Beginner's Guide, available now. Thank you very much for coming in. Palestinian aspirations to establish a capital in East Jerusalem, to keep a capital in East Jerusalem, are unwavering in defiance of this week's announcement by Israel that it is expanding Jewish neighbourhoods in the eastern half of the city. 900 housing units will be built in Gilo, a settlement of around 40,000 Israelis. To put this into perspective, here is part 2 of The City of Peace.